Anderson Cooper on CNN today devoted an entire program to the Da Vinci Code. This is big stuff. We'll be back in a moment. We'll take your phone calls on Coast to Coast AM. Well, welcome back to Coast. I'm George Norrie with our three guests, Glenn Kimball, William Henry, Lawrence Gardner, and your phone calls. We'll see if we can do this because we're doing a triple phone call response here. We'll go to our first-time caller line. You are on the air with us, and who is your question for?
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, sir. And who's your question for?
Yeah, my question was for Lawrence.
Okay, go ahead.
Now, I don't know if you would indulge me. I would like to explain Islam's point of view on the issue of Jesus.
The whose point of view?
The Islamic or Muslim point of view on the story of Jesus.
Sure.
Oh, okay.
Don't take a lot of time because so many people are calling, but go ahead,
Now,
please.
the way we believe is that he is in the same line of all the prophets, such as Adam, Noah, Moses, and that he was not divine but a human being. Mm-hmm. And that would kind of take the issue. Hold on. All right, what I'm trying to say basically is that we believe that he was never killed, that he was risen to heaven, into God, into the kingdom of heaven, as they would say, and he's coming back as the Messiah. Now, you were disclaiming a lot of other ancient manuscripts. What is your opinion on the Islamic point of view that he was a holy prophet?
Okay, and that's for you, Sir Lawrence, and I'll let you listen on your radio. Go ahead, Lawrence.
Oh, I see no reason to argue with that at all. I mean, yes, he certainly was a prophet. He was a very wise man in many ways. It's interesting, as you point out. I mean, in fact, the Quran does actually mention the crucifixion and makes the point that Jesus didn't die on the cross. So that has always intrigued me, that there was that little difference there in the two religions in the way that they portrayed that sequence.
Glenn Kimball, do we believe that Jesus indeed had these special supernatural gifts that we've read about?
Well, I think that most of the writings about Christ have excluded the mysticism surrounding Jesus. You know, we could get into an entire diatribe about the mysticism, and we'd have to again agree to disagree. But one of the things about the resurrection is really the key. It's the fulcrum. All of the critics and all of the naysayers would suggest that Jesus was not resurrected, that he actually survived. When in reality there's abundant evidence that Jesus did die and that he survived. He visited the churches for 500 years in a very personal way, and that even Tiberius Caesar sealed the tombs of Rome to keep the dead from rising and scaring the population out of their wits during the time of the crucifixion as well. And then we have the writings of Pontius Pilate and his wife Claudia Procula, and we could cite abundant evidence, but that's not the nature of this program. And I agree with Sir Lawrence in that respect. That's really not the fulcrum of this debate, of this discussion.
Wildcard Line, you're on the air with us. Hi there.
Hi. This is Margaret calling from Doral, VA, Richmond, Virginia.
Sure, Margaret. Go ahead.
And my question goes to anybody whoever can answer.
Who wants this? All right.
Okay. When the Spanish began their Inquisition on Friday the 13th to torture and kill the Knight Templars, was there another possible reason? Was it like perhaps to kill off the descendants of Jesus? Because there used to be a lot of Jews living in Spain.
Who wants that?
Well, it is claimed that the Desposini possessed certain documents. Again, Desposini, as Lawrence has said, refers to the family of the Lord, and that perhaps the Templars had acquired knowledge of these documents, if not the documents themselves. And so the idea would be that one reason for the persecution of the Templars was because of this knowledge. And in fact, in the list of charges brought by the papacy against the Templars, it was claimed that they possessed a skull that could perform miracles, that could turn a wasteland into a garden. And it's often thought that this skull is the cranium, the decapitated cranium of John the Baptist, or even the head of God, Jesus. But that never made any sense to me. I think that the skull, rather, is a symbol for a body of wisdom, a body of knowledge, a school of thought that they were privy to that taught them the secrets of transmutation of the elements, which we call alchemy, which would enable them then to turn a wasteland into a garden, especially from the soul's perspective, because ultimately the wasteland that we are all confronted with transforming into a garden is our own soul.
Why the tremendous interest in the topic, Lawrence Gardner? It's huge.
Isn't it? I think the answer to that really is that it's almost the ultimate topic, in as much as that, I mean, just about the whole of Western culture in one form or another is somehow or other embedded into this, in terms of politics, in terms of education, in terms of the church, which is really at the back of all of it. You know, all of our conditioning and our governing establishments through the centuries have had this Christian taught base fundamentally, you know, at the root of it, and it has to be the biggest question of all, really. You know, how much guts is there really in what underpins our culture and our society? And what I've always found the difficult part about being involved in this sort of research is that it's never been my intention to try and upset culture and society in any way. You know, what I do is to say, well, look, here's some other material, and it's yours if you want it. Here's a choice. However, what I've also found is that generally the discoveries that I make and other people make embellish the culture. They don't take anything away from it. They add to it in a very colourful way that actually makes people feel more comfortable with what they didn't understand. And this is people's biggest problem, I think, in as much as that this whole scenario is sitting here, placed before us, and most people don't actually understand it. And I can remember being back at school and in church as a kid, and whenever I asked a question, any question at all really, there was never an answer given. And that's what's led me, I suppose, to look for answers. And they're not always the right answers. Sometimes they are, and you know, who knows? But people now have a questing spirit, which I don't think really existed, certainly when I was a kid, that it wasn't there. We were all too worried about getting over the war and one thing or another. But the Internet has spurred this questing spirit. You know, nothing now is deemed to be necessarily kept in the background. We have a right to know. Truth, fact, fiction, or whatever, we have a right to know what's out there. And I think that the whole current fever is about that, really. People are now wanting to know, but more than that, they now feel that they have a right to know. And the quest begins. And it's like the quest for the Holy Grail, I suppose. You know, it's out there somewhere. Let's just look and see what we can find.
All right, let's go to our first-time caller line. You're on the air with us. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Rome, New York.
Okay, sir. Go ahead.
My name is Scott. You know, I want to dispute a few things here. First of all, they basically admitted that Dan Brown was a liar because he played loose with the facts. Obviously, they're saying he's a liar. And I want to go on before anyone interrupts me. We're not threatened by you people, but we're insulted by you. And all the Catholics and all the Christians that went with such fever and such happiness to go see that movie, I wonder if they made a movie that depicted their mothers and fathers in such a bad light, they'd be so happy and excited to go see that movie when we're supposed to love Christ more than we're supposed to love even our own mothers and fathers. But these heresies that these people bring up have been part of anti-Catholicism for the centuries, but the church has always fought them, and the church has answers to them, unlike what that man just said. Read the Catechism of the Council of Trent. Your answers, there's all answers in there to all your silly questions. And I'll say another thing. We had great saints in the Catholic Church. St. Thomas Aquinas, probably one of the greatest brains of all time. And if you think, and he was born in a wealthy family, and if you think for one moment that he'd be fooled and he would lie to so many people throughout the centuries, you're sadly mistaken. Your premise is based on the idea that all the popes, all the cardinals, all the saints, all the bishops have lied to the Catholic people throughout the centuries, and I find it disgraceful. As far as the perpetual virginity of the Blessed Mother, read against Helvidius. You'll find she had no other children. She had no other children besides Christ himself. And with that, if you have a question, I'll answer it. If not, That's fine.
All right. Does anybody want to react to that?
I'll just make one little point about the last bit. I mean, overall, this is a perfect example, I think, really, of how big this subject is and how many people are interested in it from all sorts of angles and viewpoints. And what we can never do from any side of the debate is to deny anybody their right to
No, he's very
opinion.
entitled to those
the
views.
The gospel itself, I mean, in terms of Mary, it actually on two occasions, it's certainly in Mark and I think it's Matthew as well, refers to Jesus as Mary's firstborn son. So why firstborn son if she had no others?
Well, that's a good point.
And we have to introduce a group of people called the Cathars here as well. They were gentle, peaceful people who believed they had a special affection for Mary Magdalene. They believing her to be the mother of Jesus' child. And what happened to the Cathars? They were exterminated en masse by the very church this gentleman is describing as an organization of peace and love. I don't think that genocide is a way to promote a peaceful and loving relationship with God. And what we have to get over is this emotional response that comes along with this and understand, hey, we're all looking for balance here, balance between male and female, East and West, Muslim and Christian, because there is a desire on the part of millions of people to create what Jesus considered or labeled the kingdom of heaven on earth, which is as much a social order as it is a religious notion.
Hey, can you imagine what would have happened if Dan Brown also included that maybe Jesus was an extraterrestrial? Look out. West of the Rockies, you're on Coast to Coast with us. Hi there.
Hi there. The New World Order wants to create a one world government and a one world religion. You can blend all the four major religions, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism into almost one. You can blend them all in. The only thing standing in their way is the Son of God, Christianity. So you got to make Jesus into a man to accomplish this. And I'll take it a step further. The only way they can do that is to take control of the papacy. They have to. The prophecy says that a pope will die outside of the Vatican, will be killed outside of the Vatican. Then they will set up a false pope, false prophet, which will change. He'll change everything. Catholicism is 70% of Christianity. If you can take hold of that and tell people, hey, Jesus was just a man, then you got yourself one world religion, and you got the Antichrist set up perfectly for that.
Well, I'm not going to doubt that they wouldn't like a one-world religion. I don't think they'll ever get to that, but they'll sure give it as much of a try as they can. East of the Rockies, you're up with us on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Hi, this is Francis calling from Brooklyn, New York.
Hi, Francis.
The most interesting discussion this evening, gentlemen. I just wanted to make a comment, and that is that I find it very exciting that individuals are now taking it upon themselves to read the sacred texts and to read history without having it sort of mediated by an organized religion. And when we're able to do that, I think we're going to be able to develop our own spirituality. And I think this is really wonderful. And it was only about, 12 or 14 years ago when Elaine Pagels did her Gnostic Gospels. And by reading her work, we see how difficult and how the political influence can exist with regard to spiritual or hermeneutical meanings with regards to sacred texts and things. And I wanted to also make the comment that what's happened with postmodern anthropology and the realist or the new history in Europe, especially espoused by the philosopher and historian Carlo Ginzburg with his Minocchio study of the the cheese and the worms, we really begin to see how the institutions functioned at certain points in time and how they actually violated many of the spiritual doctrines that the organized religions, had dictated. And I think it's terrific. We can learn much from Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, and many others. And I think when we're free to do that on our own, we're going to have that personal alchemy that may be the solution for the problems we're seeing right now. Thanks a lot, gentlemen.
All right. Thank you, Francis. I like what he had to say.
Yes.
Yeah, it comes down to that expression. It's two words: know thyself. And even in the Gospel of Thomas, the Gnostic Jesus says that when you come to know yourselves, you will realize that it's you who are the sons of the living Father. But if you will not know yourselves, you dwell in poverty. And another word for poverty is identifying yourself with sinfulness and need. If we could make knowing ourselves the first step to salvation, that presents an entirely different scenario for us. It does not exclude Jesus, but it takes a different path that leads to perhaps the same result for many, but also an enlightened approach for others.
Let's go to our wild card line. It's your turn. Hi there.
Yes, good morning.
Uh-huh.
My question can be for Glenn.
Okay.
Well, in fact, it's just really one question, then I have a comment. Most of Dan Brown's book is based upon the Gnostic of Philip, and from what I understand, that particular writing was written about 100 years after Christ, and that it has many missing words from the lines. And how can you, not necessarily Mr. Glenn personally, but any of you, state that it's factual, when in fact Mr. Brown had to change his own stand on his own book, stating that it also had a lot of fiction. Originally, he had stated it was all fact.
You're right.
But then, because of educated people pointing out errors, he had to change his own stand.
Well, maybe I could back up a step and interject one of the scripture for you. In John 21:25, and I quote it for you, "And many things Jesus did, I suppose, if they were all written, the world itself could not contain all the books that should be written." That's where we really come into a problem. We think that there's very little written about Jesus, and in reality, there's a wealth of information written about Jesus. And with regard to the Nag Hammadi text, you're right about the Gospel of Philip. But when you look at the circumstantial evidence, certainly Sir Lawrence Gardner's presented a wonderful case scenario, as well as William Henry, that Jesus was in fact married. And we don't have to take that one particular text. It was really not the Gospel of Philip; it was the Gospel of Mary Magdalene that had the hole in it where Jesus was supposedly kissing Christ, or Mary Magdalene was kissing Christ on the mouth. That's not you can't take that one hole in that document and suggest that there's problems with the entire text because of that particular problem with that particular manuscript. That's the reason why I've started this class on ancient manuscripts, is to give a broad range to people about the things that were spoken of in John 21:25.
All right, stay with us. More to come. Your final questions. Just got a fast blast from someone who thinks everybody here is nuts, and then he spouted off a few horrible four-letter words. That's really Christian. I'll be back. Well, happy birthday to my mother, by the way. She's 77 years old. I can't believe how fast time goes by. On our next Coast to Coast program, our guest will be Wayne Herschel, and he's going to be talking about how he believes we were invaded 10,000 years ago by those up there. So that's going to be a fascinating program. When we come back, we'll finish up with the rest of your phone calls and our three special guests tonight, Glenn Kimball, William Henry, Lawrence Gardner, right here on Coast to Coast AM. Hey, Glenn, William, and Lawrence, before we go back to final calls here, I want to give you all an opportunity just to tell us a little bit about what you've been up to, what you're doing, and thank you all for participating in the program. Glenn, you go first, if you would.
Yes, we've started a course of ancient manuscript study to try and fulfill the statement of John when he said, "And many things Jesus did, I suppose, if they were all written, the world itself could not contain all the books that should be written." And that course of study will be in perpetuity. And go to my website and you can find out about how to sign up for the class. And I wanted to just tell before, if I don't get a chance, I hope Sir Lawrence considers me one of his biggest fans, and I hope William will always consider me his friend.
Well, let's find out. William, will Glenn be one of your friends?
Oh, absolutely, always. Thank you, Glenn, for saying so. And likewise, Lawrence, really great to hear your voice back on the radio waves. I know you've had a trying year this past year, and really thrilled that you're doing so well. I'm right now on my agenda. I've got an important conference coming up here in Nashville called Awakening the Temple of Light, which is pretty much sold out. So I've announced a second conference in September 16th. People who are interested can go to my website, williamhenry.net, for more information. And now working on a new book called The Dimension of the Blessed, which is about many of the intriguing references in not just the Bible, but Egyptian myth and scripture to other dimensions and the way in which we can connect with those other dimensions.
All right. And Lawrence, how about you?
Well, on the personal front, George, I mean, apart from the fact that I know you pretty well by now, and I've known William for years, I've never met or spoken to Glenn before, but I have to say, Glenn, it's been a pleasure, and I've enjoyed the program. On my front, as William said, I've had a bit of a trying year. This is actually only my second week of being back on public broadcasting after a few months off after some nasty facial surgery, so it's a bit of a debut for me, really. I was very lucky to have 2 new books released last year, so it gave me a little bit of free time. I had the Magdalene Legacy, which is basically, I guess it's a sort of Dan Brown linked book, which came out in the early part of last year, but it's really a continuation of Bloodline of the Holy Grail. And then in the latter part of last year, The Shadow of Solomon, which is a book about Freemasonry and my experiences in that over 20 years. And so it bought me a bit of free time, first to be ill, but secondly to concentrate on my current project, which is really progressing the movie based on my book Lost Secrets of the Sacred Art, which we spoke about, I believe, a couple of years ago when I did a talk on that program. And the movie is called Lost Secrets. It's essentially, I mean, based on much of what we've been talking about tonight. It's a story of an aspect of the Desposini, and it's linked up to the monatomic gold culture, and it has to do with time travel. It's a really exciting adventure movie, really, but it's a lot of, as Dan Brown would say, a lot of facts at the base of it. So I've been having a lot of fun with that, and that's nicely into development and moving into pre-production now. It's a whole new experience for me. It means, getting involved with people who are talking in terms of money as if it's Toyland, millions and millions and millions, and we're looking forward to being properly in pre-production very soon, and my website will keep everybody updated on that front.
Please. Okay, back to the phones. First-time caller line. Hi there. You're on the air.
Hello?
Yes?
Hi, I'm Dana. How are you?
Fine, Dana. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Nashville.
Okay, in Williams' neck of the woods. Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I'm interested about the awakening of the Temple of Light. I hope it's not sold out, but I'd like to go if it's not. My question involves, first of all, I haven't seen or read the Da Vinci Code, but I'm very interested in the Gnostics. And I've heard a theory about many visions and experiences in the Bible being based on hallucinations, possibly from natural, quote-unquote, drugs, and that possibly Jesus was a shaman of sorts and had taken such drugs, and this is a way to take the mystic approach.
Like the ayahuasca or something like that?
Yeah, and find God within yourself. And I just didn't know if any of you guys had heard of this, and could that explain, the burning bush, for example, and some of the power Jesus may have had making ethereal things like physical?
Okay, well, who wants that?
Yeah, this is a theory that was
Great. Thanks, David.
put forth primarily by John Allegro, who was one of the original interpreters or decipherers of the Dead Sea Scrolls. A theologian who looked into the scrolls and somewhat as a vendetta against vested interests that sought to withhold the knowledge of the scrolls to the general public. John Allegro put forth this very controversial theory that, in fact, the term Christos refers to a psychedelic mushroom. And when the Romans record the Christians were under the influence of Christos, it's in fact they were imbibing in psychedelic drugs. And so you can just imagine how well that was received, especially in the 1960s and 1970s. And it's become a theory that's sort of been tabled for a while. There have been other researchers. Terence McKenna has referenced this. Many others have looked at the psychedelic sacrament, as it's called. It's a very compelling line of research that is too hot to handle for many.
Okay, back to the phones we go. Wild card line, you're up on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Yes, good evening, gentlemen.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, each and every one of you. I know the round table's pretty good and excellent, but I'd like to have all of you plus a few others around the dinner table where we could jaw this to the bone.
As long as it's not the Last Supper, that's good enough for me. Go ahead.
That's great. Thank you.
Yes, and to all of you, and great and excellent work. But also, I'd like to refer to a passage in the Bible where Jesus had descended into hell for 3 days. Does anybody think that God or Jesus does anything by half? There is no hell. Hell is what we create here on earth amongst ourselves, and it is an illusion. Thank you for bringing all this to the forefront. God bless you all, and keep up the fantastic work, boys.
All right, sir. Thank you. There you go. Nice compliment for you three. West of the Rockies, welcome to Coast. You're on the air with us. Hi there.
Hi, this is Matt from Ventura.
Oh, hi, Matt. That's in California, everybody. Go ahead.
Yep. Yeah, I just wanted to bring up this point. I don't want the Christians out there and the Catholics to think that even if Jesus got married, that would mean that he's not divine. That would mean that he sinned or anything. I mean, most marriages in almost all cultures back then, they were arranged, and a lot of times you wouldn't even know your wife until the day of your marriage. So, it would be possible that he didn't even lust after Mary if he did get married to her until he was married with her, and so it's not actually a sin. And so he could actually have children too, and I think a lot of people are worried that, because he got married, or, you're saying he got married, that he sinned somehow.
I think from a Christian perspective, as you put it, that Christians would be worried about this, I mean, in the first place, Jesus wasn't a Christian anyway. He was a Jew, so we have to accept that culture rather than what any Christians might think. But at the other end of the scale, given that Jesus is primarily a part of the Christian religion, we have to accept the fact that marriages have historically and still are conducted by the church. So if they regarded marriage as being a sin, that doesn't really show their weekly and daily ceremonies up in a very good light, does it?
Okay, thanks, Lawrence, for that response. Next up, we'll go to our East of the Rockies line. You're on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Hi. This is Douglas from Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Sure, Douglas. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to talk to you, gentlemen. What I wanted to find out was a question. My question has to do with the direct ascendancy of Jesus towards royal families, and I was wondering why after the coronation of Elizabeth as Queen of England, she was later taken to another room where she was placed on a throne with the stone of Scone underneath of it, and anyway, she was crowned Queen of Israel.
I didn't hear that. Anybody else hear that?
It's news to me.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, Douglas. Okay. That would have been intriguing. First-time caller line, you're up on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Hi, my name is Kenny. I'm calling from Milwaukee.
Hi, Kenny.
My question is, I've read the books, the Hiram Key and the Book of Hiram, and it spoke of Jesus possibly being involved in the Masonic traditions, and some of the things such as raising the dead and turning water to wine were kind of linked to Masonic rituals.
I've heard that too. Who wants it?
Well, Masonic rituals.
Well, yes. I mean, the two books that you mentioned are written by the same authors, aren't they? Bob Lomas and Chris Knight. And they've come at their whole perspective of writing, in fact, from a Masonic background. They've both been Freemasons for a long time. And they essentially, some years ago, got a little bit disturbed, as I did, actually, in having been involved for so long in something which didn't teach them very much about what they thought it would. So they began their own investigations, and one of those led them down this track. I mean, yes, there certainly are some similarities. It's really interesting from my perspective, because if one looks at the Greek texts of the Gospels, we know that within the Gospels, in their English translation, for example, that Jesus' father Joseph, and in fact Jesus himself on one occasion, are classified as carpenters. And this is part of the colourful mythology that they were poor carpenters. But actually, the words that were used in the original text that got translated to carpenters was hotekton, which actually translates from the Greek as master of the craft. So Joseph and Jesus were masters of the craft, and it's really quite intriguing that is still a term used within Freemasonry, that you rise through the degrees to become a master of the craft. And so, yes, there could easily have been a link there.
And that's one of the real key puns here, too, George, is this term master of the craft, because the craft refers to not just Freemasonry, but also to alchemy. And when we refer to Jesus as a hotekton, as a wood worker, we have to recognize that there are the four elements, earth, air, fire, and water, but there's also a fifth element in the Eastern tradition called wood, which is also known as quintessence, the spiritual energy, the life force energy. And it suggests that Jesus wasn't going around making furniture. Rather, as a woodworker, a carpenter, he was rather working with the life force energy. That's a completely different story than we're taught in Sunday school, and one that ultimately leads to the enlightenment of the individual and the possibility that we too can become masters of the craft.
Okay, Wild Card Line, your turn on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Hi, this is Jolynn calling from Nashville,
Hello,
Tennessee.
Jolynn.
Hi, I think this question will be directed towards William Henry, and I'd like to know what you would say is the main reason why the sacred feminine got subverted in the first place. Could it possibly be that the elephant in the room tonight is sexuality, and the fact that it's sexuality that is considered a sin, and people have a hard time dealing with the idea of a sexual Jesus?
Well, that's a beautiful question, and I'm glad to hear Nashville being so well represented tonight.
Thank you.
I think that that's a good part of it right there, that there is this feminine aspect of God, and there is also this idea that women hold these secrets within themselves, and it's the unity of the male and female that ultimately brings about the transformation of the individual, both from within ourselves, referring to our inner male and female, and also in our male-female relationships. And so that's a good bit of it, but it's also because we're dealing with organizations that tend to want to promote this idea that men are somehow superior to women. I mean, the gentleman called earlier used the term lie. I can't think of a bigger lie than the one that we're told that men are somehow superior to women.
It doesn't seem possible to me.
I love that. All right, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Time for one or two more, then we're going to have to wrap things up. West of the Rockies, you're up on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Hi, this is Sarah calling from California.
Hi, sir.
Hi, and my question is to any one of the three. Back in the 90s, I read this book called Jesus the Man. I think it was by Barbara Thurin, and it talks about Jesus being just a regular man, and Mary wasn't a virgin birth with Mary. Apparently, according to the Jewish religion at that time, they had some kind of engagement. She got pregnant before they were officially married. They did have children. He was on the cross, but he didn't die. And I was wondering if any one of them have heard of it. That's the best I can remember. It was a long time that I read the book.
All right. Anybody?
Well, I can answer it, if you like.
Okay.
Barbara Thurin's book is a book that I know really well. In fact, her other books as well as Jesus the Man. Barbara was Doctor of Theology at the Sydney University for a long time, and she got very, very involved in certain aspects of transcribing Dead Sea Scrolls. Mm-hmm. And what she found within them was something called a pesha. It's a code, really, and in fact the scrolls are very explicit. But what they say is, when we say this, we mean that. When we say this, we mean that. And it's a little bit like if I were talking to you about the world of theatre now, and I said, theatre investors are called angels, and I might say, well, next Thursday the angels are going to talk to the stars, and we know that that meant that the investors are going to talk to the actors. But in 2,000 years' time, angels talking to the stars would sound like something a bit religious and way out. And so once she applied the pressure of the Dead Sea Scrolls to the New Testament Gospels, what she got was another parallel underlying story, which moves through the Gospels, and exactly as our friend Sarah here says, it told the story of Jesus' marriage. It told the story about the birth of 3 children. I mean, all of the things which by different routes I've found the same answers, really, although I haven't applied her same, doctorate knowledge to it. But yeah, it's a very interesting book, Barbara's, and I think it's probably one of the greatest books to emerge in the last 20 years on the subject.
And controversial, nonetheless.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for the call, Sarah.
Sure.
And about a minute left, so let's wrap up. Give each of you about 20, 30 seconds to say goodbye. You, Lawrence, take it away.
Oh, this is goodbye time. My goodness, doesn't it go quick?
Oh, it's amazing.
Well, I suppose I can wrap it up from a historical point of view by really maintaining what I said earlier here. We're in a world now which is about choices, options, free thinking, and people looking for answers. And I have to say that all history has ever been is about that, but for the most part, it has been prevented. So for those people who really truly believe, for whatever reason, that history is carved in stone and that that's the end of it, I disagree. My answer is that history is not carved in stone. History is written in blood, and blood is still flowing, and the answers are still out there.
And Lawrence wrapped it up for both you, William, and you, Glenn, but thank you both for being on the program as well.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. They know they know what they're saying. You might not agree with what they're saying. You may take the stance that you've always taken, but it's a different view, different perspective nonetheless. For Steve Carr, Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean LaDesseur, Ross Mitchell, Ian Punnett, and Art Bell, I'm George Norrie. Somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone.